The sound of the door slamming in my face echoed through the quiet, tree-lined suburban street. Brianna, my eldest daughter, had just shut me out without a hint of mercy. I walked to the second house, the modern glass and steel home belonging to Terrence, my middle son. He opened the door just a crack, handed me a crumpled $50 bill, and pushed me back out, muttering something about his professional reputation and his neighbors watching. 2 children, 2 rejections, 2 direct stabs to the heart of a mother who had sacrificed everything for them. But when I knocked on the third door, the humblest one, located far from the gated communities in a working-class neighborhood, something shifted. Malik opened the door. My youngest son, the public school teacher with a modest salary whom the rest of the family looked down upon, and standing beside him was Aaliyah, the daughter-in-law the others despised because she didn't come from money or a prominent family. They didn't hesitate for a second. They pulled me inside from the biting cold as if it were the only right thing to do in the world. That night, sitting on their worn-out sofa, I heard them whispering in the kitchen about selling their wedding bands just to buy me groceries. They had no idea I could hear them. They had no idea who I really was. And when my attorney, Moses Reed, arrived the next morning with a security detail at that tiny house, when the truth was laid bare before everyone, the faces of Brianna and Terrence no longer showed contempt. They showed pure terror because they had just lost everything. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the exact moment I decided to conduct this test, the night I realized I had raised monsters with my own money. It all started 3 weeks earlier in my office on the 23rd floor. I am Evelyn Kincaid. For 35 years, I built a textile empire that supplies the largest retail chains across the country. When my husband passed away 12 years ago, everyone thought the company would crumble. The partners bet on my failure. Competitors sharpened their knives, waiting to scavenge what was left. But I didn't break. I worked 18 hours a day. I learned every facet of the business my husband used to handle. I negotiated with banks, international suppliers, and difficult clients who had zero respect for a woman in this industry. I swallowed humiliations that would have shattered anyone else. I didn't just keep the company afloat. I quintupled its value. And do you know why I did all that? For my 3 children. To give them the life I never had, so they would never feel the sting of hunger like I did as a girl growing up in the projects. I wanted them to have opportunities, elite educations, and doors opened for them everywhere. Brianna studied in London. I paid for an MBA at an Ivy League university that cost over $120,000. Terrence went to an elite private medical school. I invested over $350,000 in his education. Malik, my youngest, was the only one who chose a state university. He wanted to be a teacher. The other 2 mocked him for years because of that decision. I gave them everything: houses, cars, luxury vacations, and connections. Every time they called, I opened my checkbook. Every time they had a problem, I solved it with money. I became a walking ATM for my own children. But that January night, sitting in my empty office and looking at the financial statements of the allowances I had given them over the years, something snapped inside me. I had received 3 calls that same day. Brianna wanted $100,000 to remodel her kitchen. Terrence needed $70,000 for some speculative investment with a friend. And Malik, my Malik, called only to ask how I was feeling. That difference hit me like a sledgehammer. 2 children who only called when they needed cash. One who called just to check on me. It was in that moment I made my decision. I would conduct a test, the ultimate test. I would disappear. I would pretend to be bankrupt, homeless, and destitute, and I would knock on their doors asking for shelter. I wanted to see who would open their door, who would be ashamed, and who would remember I was their mother before I was their source of wealth. I asked Moses, my trusted attorney, to keep the secret. He tried to talk me out of it, saying it was too harsh, too risky for a woman of 61 years. But my mind was made up. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see their hearts bare, without the disguise that money allowed them to wear. I locked my jewelry in the safe. I put on old clothes I found at a thrift store, a tattered gray coat that smelled of mothballs, stained pants, and shoes with soles coming apart. I dirtied my hands with soil and didn't wash my hair for 3 days. I tied my belongings in a torn plastic bag. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I looked homeless. I looked invisible. I looked exactly like what I needed to be for this test to work. The plan was simple but brutal. I would walk to their homes, knock on their doors, and tell them I had lost everything and needed a place to sleep. That was it. And I would watch. I would watch their reactions, their words, their gestures. The truth always surfaces when people don't have time to rehearse their lies. Moses got me a burner phone. He told me to call him if anything went wrong, that a car would be waiting 2 blocks away at all times, and that a security team would be watching from a distance. But I wasn't going to call. This had to be real. It had to hurt. It had to be authentic, because only in true pain is true character revealed. The first night, I left my penthouse. I left behind the warmth, the silk sheets, and the panoramic view of the city lights. I went down 23 floors and stepped onto the sidewalk. The February chill hit me like a slap in the face. There was no turning back. I walked for hours. My feet blistered, and the plastic bag tore, forcing me to carry my things in my arms. People avoided me on the sidewalks. Some looked at me with pity, others with disgust. Most simply ignored me as if I were part of the street furniture. I spent the night at the bus station. The smell of bleach and desperation clung to my clothes. A woman shared a piece of stale bread with me. She told me she had been on the street for 5 years and that her children had forgotten her. While she spoke, I thought, will that be me in a few years if I don't do something now? By the 3rd day, I was ready, filthy, hungry, and frozen to the bone, but ready. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I would go to Brianna's house first, then Terrence's, and finally to the small home shared by Malik and Aaliyah. I didn't know what I would find, but I was about to find out. Brianna's mansion shone like an obscene jewel in the middle of the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Golden gates, meticulously manicured lawns, a fountain at the entrance. I recognized every detail because I had paid the down payment on that property, $200,000 from my personal savings when she got married 7 years ago. I stood in front of the electronic gate. My legs were shaking, not just from sleeping on park benches for 3 days, but from what I was about to do. I pressed the intercom button and heard the buzz, then silence. I pressed it again. Brianna's voice came through the speaker, sounding metallic. She didn't even bother asking who it was. She just said in a bored tone that they weren't buying anything at the door. I told her it was me, her mother. There was a long pause, far too long. Then I heard the click of the gate opening just a few inches. I pushed through and walked up the stone path I had helped design. Every step was a painful irony. The front door opened before I reached it. Brianna appeared in the frame, but she didn't step out. She stayed there, blocking the entrance with her body, as if I were a bothersome street peddler. She was wearing designer loungewear that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Her hair was perfectly styled, her nails freshly done. Everything about her screamed money, comfort, and superficiality. She looked me up and down with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't worry. It was revulsion. "Mom," she finally said, dragging the word out as if it burned her tongue. "What are you doing here?" She didn't even ask it as a question of concern. She stated it like my presence was an inconvenience that required an immediate explanation. I told her the story I had prepared, that I had lost everything. The company went bankrupt, the creditors took my house, and I had been on the street for 3 days. I told her I just needed a place to sleep while I figured out my situation. My own daughter listened to me without moving a single muscle in her face. When I finished talking, she looked over my shoulder toward the neighbors' houses. She was more worried about who might see me standing at her entrance than what I had just told her. That gesture pierced me like a rusted knife. "Mom, this isn't a good time," she said, lowering her voice. "Robert has an important dinner with partners tonight. I can't have this kind of situation right now." Situation. She called me a situation, as if I were a plumbing problem or a leak in the roof. I begged her, and I hate to admit I did, but I needed to see how far her coldness went. I told her it would only be for one night, that I would sleep anywhere, the maid's quarters, the garage, anywhere. I just needed a roof. Brianna shook her head. Her diamond earrings flashed with the movement, the same earrings I had given her for her last birthday. $5,000 in gemstones hanging from the ears of a daughter who had no room for her mother in her 6-bedroom house. "You can't stay here," she said firmly. "It would affect our reputation at the club. The neighbors talk, you know how it is. Besides, if you're really in financial trouble, the last thing you need is to be around people who are going to judge you. It's for your own good, Mom." For my own good. She wrapped her rejection in a layer of fake maternal concern, as if she were doing me a favor by shutting the door in my face. I tried to take a step forward. She stepped back and closed the door until only a crack remained. "There are shelters," she said, "charity organizations. I'm sure you'll find something, and when you resolve your situation, when things get better, we'll talk. But right now, I can't help you. I'm sorry." She wasn't sorry. That was the most horrible part. Her voice didn't have a single ounce of genuine pain. She was just in a hurry to end this awkward conversation and get back to her perfect world of appearances. "Brianna," I said, using her full name, "please, I am your mother. I changed your diapers. I taught you to walk. I paid for your education, your wedding, this very house. Everything you have came from me." Her face hardened, and I saw something that chilled my blood more than any night on the street. I saw resentment. It was as if everything I had done for her was a debt that weighed her down, as if my motherly love was an unbearable burden she had been waiting to drop. "Exactly, Mom," she said with venom in every syllable. "You gave everything. You were always giving, controlling, deciding. Now that you have nothing, you expect me to pay it all back like I'm an investment. It doesn't work that way. I have my own life, my own responsibilities. I can't carry the weight of your financial mistakes." The door closed. I heard the bolt turn. The sound of that metal sliding into place was like hearing a coffin being nailed shut forever. I stood there, staring at the solid mahogany door I had helped pay for. Through the side window, I saw Brianna walk back to her living room, pick up her phone, and start talking to someone while laughing. I walked away from that house feeling something worse than sadness. I felt empty. The daughter I raised, the girl who hugged me when she had nightmares, the young woman who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke up with her, no longer existed. She had been replaced by this cold woman who valued the opinion of her neighbors more than the well-being of her own mother. I walked 2 miles until I reached the neighborhood where Terrence lived. My feet were bleeding inside the broken shoes. Hunger made me see black spots every time I moved my head too fast, but I kept going because I needed to complete this test. I needed to know if all my children were the same or if there was any humanity left in any of them. Terrence's house was more modern than Brianna's, all glass and steel, minimalist and cold, just like him. I rang the bell and waited. This time there was no delay. Terrence opened the door almost immediately, as if he were expecting a delivery. His expression when he saw me was one of genuine shock. "Mom," he exclaimed, and for a second I thought maybe he would be different. "What happened to you?" He seemed worried. His eyes scanned my dirty clothes, my greasy hair, and the torn bag I was carrying. He took a step toward me, and I thought he would hug me. He didn't. Instead, he looked quickly toward both sides of the street, just like Brianna. The same concern for appearances, the same fear of someone seeing them with me. "Get inside, quick," he said, ushering me in but closing the door immediately behind me as if he were hiding evidence of a crime. I stayed in the foyer. He didn't invite me further inside. He kept his distance as if my poverty were contagious. "What happened?" he repeated. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call?" I told him the same story. Bankruptcy, losses, the street, the need for temporary shelter. Terrence listened to me with his arms crossed. I saw his brain working. I saw the calculations forming behind his eyes. He wasn't thinking about how to help me. He was thinking about how to get rid of me as quickly and with as little trouble as possible. When I finished talking, he sighed. A long, tired sigh, as if I were a difficult patient in his office and not his mother. "Mom, I have a reputation to maintain. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon. My patients are important people, politicians, CEOs. If word gets out that my mother is living on the street, it affects my practice. You understand that, right?" "No," I said with total honesty. "I don't understand." Terrence pulled out his wallet. The leather was Italian. I recognized it because I had given it to him for his birthday 2 years ago. It cost $800. He pulled out some bills, $50 in total. He held it out to me but didn't move closer, as if he were afraid to touch me. "Take this," he said. "Go to a budget hotel. Rest. Take a shower. When you're presentable, we can talk about how to resolve your situation, but you can't stay here. I have surgeries early tomorrow morning. I need to focus. I can't have this distraction." Distraction. His homeless mother was a distraction. I didn't take the money. I stared him straight in the eyes, looking for any trace of the boy who used to run into my arms when I came home from work. The boy who told me that when he grew up he would buy me a big house so I would never have to work so hard. That boy had died at some point, and I hadn't even noticed the funeral. "Terrence," I said, my voice breaking, "I spent entire nights studying with you for your medical exams. I brought you coffee at 3 a.m. when you were cramming. When you couldn't afford textbooks that cost $500 each, I sold my jewelry to buy them for you. And now you offer me $50 and call me a distraction." He clenched his jaw. The bills remained extended between us like a physical barrier. "Mom, it's not personal," he said in that clinical voice he probably used to give bad news to his patients' families. "It's just that right now, I'm not in a position to help you the way you need. I have my own family to support, my own expenses. I can't just take on another person." Another person. That's what I was to him. Another person. Not his mother, not the woman who sacrificed her own dreams to finance his, just another person who needed something from him and made him uncomfortable. I took the $50, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see if even that pathetic gesture would cause him any kind of emotion. Nothing. His face remained neutral, professional, and distant, as if he had just completed an unpleasant but necessary business transaction. "Now I need you to go," he said, pointing to the door. "Seriously, Mom, I have to be up early. I can't be dealing with this now. When you stabilize, call me, and we'll see what we can do. But you have to understand that I have my limits, too." He put his hand on my shoulder, not with affection, but with firmness. He was guiding me toward the exit, literally pushing me out of his life. When we reached the door, he opened it and gestured for me to leave. The cold night air hit me again. "Take care," he said. And then sincerely, "Mom, you should have been more careful with your investments. At your age, you should have had everything secured. This shouldn't be happening." He was blaming me. He was telling me this was my fault, that if I was on the street, it was because I had been irresponsible. The son whose $350,000 education I paid for was giving me financial management lessons while kicking me out of his house. The door closed. This time I didn't hear the bolt because Terrence had already disappeared into the interior of his house before I even finished walking down the porch steps. He didn't even stay to make sure I got away safely. He just closed it and left. I stood under the yellow light of the garden lamp. The 50 was crumpled in my hand. I looked at it as if it were poison. This dirty paper was what my relationship with my son was worth. $50, less than what he probably spent on a random dinner. I put the money in my pocket. I would use it later, not for myself, but to remind me that this had happened, that this was real, that my 2 eldest children had rejected me on the same day without even blinking. 2 closed doors, 2 lost children. I had one left. Malik, my youngest son, the one who chose to be a teacher when everyone told him it was a waste of talent. The one who married Aaliyah, a girl from a humble family who worked cleaning offices when they met. The one the whole family looked at with pity, mixed with disdain. I have to confess something that shames me. I had also looked down on them, not openly, but in my heart. When Malik introduced me to Aaliyah, I expected more. I expected a girl from a good family, someone with useful connections. I expected someone who would raise my son's status, not someone who would keep him in economic mediocrity. In family gatherings, Brianna and Terrence made hurtful comments. They said things like, "It's a shame Malik settled for so little," or "Imagine if he had met someone with ambition." And I didn't defend them. I stayed quiet. I let those poisonous words float in the air without contradicting them. Aaliyah always noticed. I saw how her smile grew smaller every time Brianna talked about her trips to Europe or when Terrence mentioned his millionaire patients. I saw how Malik squeezed her hand under the table, giving her silent strength, and I looked the other way. Now, walking toward their small house in a working-class neighborhood, far from the mansions of my other children, I felt the weight of my own hypocrisy. I had judged Aaliyah for not having money. I had found her insufficient, and she probably knew it. Probably every time she saw me, she could feel my silent disappointment. Malik and Aaliyah's house was a modest single-story building, the cream-colored paint peeling in some places. There was a small garden with flowers that Aaliyah evidently tended with her own hands, a wooden fence that needed repair. Everything was simple, humble, and honest. There was no electronic gate, no intercom, just a wooden door with a simple doorbell. I pressed the button and heard the bell ring inside the house. I heard footsteps. The door opened. Aaliyah appeared in front of me. She was wearing an olive-green knitted sweater that she had probably made herself. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, except her wedding ring, which was a thin silver band that probably cost less than $100 when they bought it. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Mildred!" she exclaimed, using my first name as she always did. She never called me mother-in-law or Mrs. Kincaid, just Mildred. At first, that had bothered me. It seemed like a lack of respect. Now I understood it was her way of trying to connect with me as equals. "My God, what happened to you?" she said immediately, and without waiting for an answer, she took my arm and pulled me inside. The warmth of the house enveloped me. It smelled of home cooking, freshly baked bread, a real home. "Malik!" she yelled toward the back of the house. "Come quick, it's your mother!" Malik appeared from what seemed to be the kitchen. He was wearing a plain gray shirt and old jeans. When he saw me, his face went through a rainbow of emotions: surprise, worry, pain, and something else I didn't see on the faces of Brianna and Terrence. Genuine love. "Mom!" he said, running toward me. "What happened? Are you okay? Did someone hurt you? Where have you been?" His hands touched my face and my shoulders, checking me as if looking for wounds. He didn't care about my dirt. He didn't care about my smell. He only cared if I was okay. Aaliyah had already disappeared toward the back of the house. I heard her moving quickly, opening drawers, turning on the water heater. Malik guided me to the sofa, a worn brown fabric piece that had a sewn-on patch on one of the arms. I sat down and felt my legs finally give out after so many days of walking. I told them the story again. Bankruptcy, the loss of everything, the nights on the street. Malik listened to me, with tears forming in his eyes. He didn't say anything about his reputation. He didn't mention his neighbors. He didn't ask how I had gotten into this situation. He just listened with an open and broken heart. When I finished, there was a heavy silence. Then Malik spoke. "You're staying here," he said firmly. "It's not negotiable, Mom. This is your home now." Aaliyah returned with clean towels and clothes. "I heated up water for you to bathe," she said with a gentle smile. "We don't have a tub, just a shower, but the water is hot. Then you eat something. You look very thin." "But you don't have space," I protested weakly, though my heart was already exploding with an emotion I couldn't name. "You only have one bedroom." "We'll sleep in the living room," Malik said without hesitation. "You take the bed. We are not discussing this." "No," I insisted. "I can sleep in the living room. You need your privacy." Aaliyah knelt in front of me. Her brown eyes looked at me with a warmth I didn't deserve. "Mildred," she said softly, "you are Malik's mother. You are family. Family doesn't sleep on the sofa when there's a bed available. Please, let us do this for you." That "let us do this for you" tore me to pieces. My other children had offered me money and excuses. This couple, who had almost nothing, offered me everything they had without conditions or reproaches. I bathed in their small bathroom, which had chipped tiles and a mended shower curtain. The hot water fell on my dirty skin, and I let myself cry there where no one could see me. I wasn't crying because of the days on the street. I was crying for the years I had wasted valuing the wrong things. I was crying because my 2 eldest children, to whom I gave castles, closed their doors to me, and my youngest son, who lived in this humble house, opened his wide. When I came out of the bathroom, Aaliyah had laid out clean clothes on the bed. They were hers, soft gray sweatpants and a light brown hoodie. They were a bit big on me because Aaliyah was taller, but they were clean and smelled of cheap fabric softener and genuine care. On the small dining table, which barely fit in the space between the living room and the kitchen, a plate of food was waiting for me. Homemade vegetable soup, toast, and a glass of orange juice. Nothing elaborate, nothing expensive, but prepared with love and served with dignity. Malik and Aaliyah sat with me. They didn't look at me with pity while I ate. They talked about normal things, about Malik's students, how one of them had finally learned to read after months of effort. Aaliyah talked about the flowers in the garden that were starting to bloom despite the cold. They treated me like a person, not a tragedy. After dinner, while Aaliyah was clearing the dishes, I heard Malik whisper to her in the kitchen. He thought I couldn't hear them, but the thin walls of that house kept no secrets. I sat on the sofa pretending to watch their old television, but every fiber of my being was concentrated on listening to their conversation. "We don't have enough money to support 3 people, Malik whispered. "My salary barely covers the 2 of us." "I know," Aaliyah replied. Her voice was calm, not panicked. "I already thought about it." There was a silence. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of a drawer opening. "We can sell the rings," Aaliyah said. "We don't really need them. They're just symbols. Our marriage doesn't depend on 2 pieces of metal." My heart stopped. They were talking about selling their wedding bands, the only jewelry they had, the symbols of their commitment. "No, Aaliyah," Malik said. But his voice didn't sound convincing. It sounded torn. "Those rings mean something to you." "They mean that we love each other," Aaliyah replied, "and we'll keep loving each other with or without them. Your mother needs us now. That's more important than any symbol. Tomorrow I'll go to the pawn shop. They'll probably give us about $300. With that, we'll buy food for the month and see how we go from there." $300. That was all their rings would be worth in a pawn shop, and they were willing to give them up without a second thought. Meanwhile, Brianna had $5,000 earrings hanging from her ears and wouldn't let me in. Terrence carried an $800 wallet and gave me $50 as if it were a generous alms. "I love you," I heard Malik say. His voice was broken. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." "Nothing," Aaliyah replied with tenderness. "It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to do the right thing. Your mother raised you. She educated you. Now it's our turn to take care of her. That's how real families work." I closed my eyes tight. Tears ran down my cheeks uncontrollably. This woman I had looked at with disdain. This woman who cleaned offices to help with expenses because Malik's teacher's salary wasn't enough. This woman I considered insufficient for my son was the only person in the world who understood the true meaning of family. They returned to the living room. I quickly dried my tears and pretended to be focused on the news. Aaliyah brought me a handmade, mustard-colored knitted blanket. "It was my grandmother's," she said as she put it over my legs. "It always kept me warm. I hope it does the same for you." That night, despite my protests, they took me to the bedroom. It was a small room with a double bed, an old closet, and a dresser with peeling paint. The sheets were simple white cotton, washed so many times they were as soft as silk. On the nightstand, there was a wedding photo of them. Malik in a suit that was clearly borrowed. Aaliyah in a simple white dress she probably bought at a discount store. Both were smiling with a happiness so pure it hurt to look at. "Please, rest," Malik said, kissing my forehead as he used to do when he was a boy. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do, but tonight, just sleep peacefully. You're safe here." They left, closing the door behind them. I was left alone in that room that smelled of lavender and hope. I lay in that bed, which was the only luxury this couple possessed, and which they were handing over to me without reservation. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brianna's face as she shut the door. I saw Terrence handing me $50 as if I were some random beggar. And then I saw Aaliyah kneeling in front of me, calling me family with eyes full of genuine compassion. Around midnight, I heard movement in the living room. I got up silently and cracked the door just a few inches. I saw Malik and Aaliyah settling onto the small sofa. They didn't fit well. Malik was practically hanging off one end. Aaliyah curled up against him, trying not to fall. "I'm sorry," Malik whispered. "I know this is uncomfortable." "I'm fine," Aaliyah replied. "Just think of your mother sleeping warm and safe. That's worth any discomfort." They stayed in silence for a moment. Then Malik spoke again. "I'm sorry I can't give you more. I'm sorry you live like this. You deserve a big house, nice things, an easier life." Aaliyah's response shattered me. "Malik, I have exactly what I want. I have you. We have our health, we have jobs, we have a roof, and now we can help someone who needs us. That's not a little. That's everything." That's everything. Those 3 words contained more wisdom than all the university degrees I had paid for. This woman, with her simple clothes and her modest house, understood something my rich children had forgotten or never learned: that real wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the capacity to give when you have nothing. I went back to bed, and this time I really cried. I cried hard, muffling the sound in the pillow so they wouldn't hear me. I cried for the years I spent building an empire for children who valued nothing except money. I cried for having judged Aaliyah so poorly. I cried for almost having lost the opportunity to know the true heart of my youngest son. But I also cried with relief because, in the middle of this painful test, I had found something I thought I had lost forever: evidence that genuine love still existed, that goodness hadn't died, and that not all my children had turned into selfish monsters. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and toast. I got up and found Aaliyah in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She was wearing the same sweater as the day before. It was probably the only one she had for winter. Her hair was styled in the same simple ponytail, no pretenses, no masks. "Good morning," she said, smiling when she saw me. "I hope you slept well. There's coffee if you want." I poured myself a cup of the cheapest coffee that probably existed on the market, and it tasted like heaven. We sat together at the small table. Malik had already left for school. He had to arrive early to prepare his classroom. Aaliyah looked at me over her cup. There was something in her eyes, a quiet determination. "Mildred," she said softly, "I want you to know that as long as you need to be here, this is your home. It doesn't matter how long it is, a month, a year, whatever. We are not going to kick you out." Her words were so different from Brianna's and Terrence's that they almost didn't seem like the same language. "I appreciate it," I managed to say, "but I can't take your room indefinitely." "You're not taking it from us," she replied. "We're sharing it. That's how it works when someone is in trouble. We share what we have." She looked me directly in the eyes. "I know I was never enough for you," she said, with a brutal honesty that pierced me. "I know you wanted more for Malik, a wife with money, with connections, with a college education. I'm just a girl who cleans offices and takes care of flowers." "Aaliyah, I started to say, but she raised her hand. "It's okay," she continued. "I understand, but I want you to know something. I love your son more than I have ever loved anything in my life. And although we may never have much money, although we may never live in a mansion, I am going to make sure he knows every single day that he is loved, valued, and respected. And now you too." Her words completely broke me. Every facade I had maintained during these days collapsed like a rotten building. I started crying right there at that tiny table, drinking cheap coffee from a chipped cup. I cried like I hadn't cried in decades. Aaliyah got up and hugged me. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to comfort me with empty words. She just held me while I crumbled. Her sweater absorbed my tears, and she simply let me feel everything I needed to feel. When I could finally speak, I told her the truth. You were right. I never thought you were enough. I looked at you and saw poverty. I saw limitations. I saw everything you weren't, instead of seeing everything you are. And I was so deeply wrong that I am ashamed. Aaliyah pulled back and looked at me with those brown eyes full of a maturity I didn't have despite my 61 years. People make mistakes, she said simply. What matters is what we do after we realize it. She took my hands in hers. They were rough from work. Her nails were short, unpainted, with traces of soil underneath because she had been working in the garden. Hard-working hands, honest hands, hands that were worth more than all of Brianna's perfect manicures. I want you to know something, I continued. When all this ends, when I resolve my situation, I am going to compensate you for everything. I promise you. She shook her head gently. I don't want compensation, Mildred. We're not keeping score. We're being family, that's all. That word again. Family. Brianna and Terrence had used it as an excuse to justify everything I gave them. Your family, they said when they needed money. You're our mother, they argued when they wanted something. But when I needed them, that same word disappeared from their vocabulary. Aaliyah used that word differently. For her, family meant responsibility. It meant sacrifice. It meant opening doors instead of closing them. I spent the day helping around the house. I insisted. Aaliyah worked cleaning shifts in the afternoons, and before leaving, she left me a list of simple things I could do. Fold laundry, wash dishes, sweep. Tasks I hadn't done in years because I always had domestic help. There was something deeply humbling and at the same time liberating in scrubbing that small kitchen. My hands, accustomed to signing checks and multi-million-dollar contracts, now scrubbed old pots with a worn sponge. And with every movement, I felt I was cleaning more than dirty dishes. I was cleaning years of pride. When Malik returned from school in the afternoon, he found me preparing dinner. I had used the few ingredients they had to make something simple, rice with vegetables. Nothing elaborate, but I had made it with my own hands. "Mom," he said, surprised, "you didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," I replied. "It's the least I can do." We ate, the three of us together. We talked about everyday things. Malik talked about a student who had made a major breakthrough that day. A boy with dyslexia who had finally read a full paragraph without help. The way Malik talked about that achievement, with eyes shining with pride, made me understand something. My other children measured success in money and status. Malik measured it in lives touched, in small daily miracles, in real differences he made in the world. Brianna probably didn't even know the names of the people who worked for her. Terrence saw his patients as cases, as sources of income. But Malik knew the full stories of his students. He knew which children came without breakfast, which lived in problematic homes, who needed an adult who believed in them. And he did it with a salary that barely covered the rent, without complaining, without asking for recognition, simply because he believed it was the right thing to do. That night, after they insisted again that I take the bed, I stayed awake staring at the ceiling of that small room. Tomorrow Moses would come. Tomorrow the truth would be revealed. Tomorrow this test, which had begun with so much anger and determination, would end. But now, lying in the bed of this couple who had given me everything without asking for anything, I felt something different from anger. I felt a deep shame. Shame for having doubted Malik, for having compared him unfavorably with his siblings for years, for having thought that choosing to be a teacher was wasting his potential. Malik was the only one of my children who had fulfilled the true purpose of the education I paid for. It wasn't to accumulate wealth, it was to become a better human being, and he was the only one who had achieved it. I also felt shame regarding Aaliyah, for every time I subtly excluded her from family conversations, for every time I mentioned the wives of other successful men, as if pointing out what Malik could have had. For every look of disappointment I didn't hide well enough. Aaliyah had felt every one of those small cruelties. And still, when I knocked on her door desperate and broken, she received me with open arms. I heard their voices in the living room. They were up late. I got up silently and approached the door, not to spy this time, but because I needed to better understand these two people who had shown me more humanity than anyone in years. "Do you think your mom will be okay?" Aaliyah was asking. Her voice sounded worried. "I don't know," Malik replied. "I've never seen her like this, so lost, so vulnerable." "I'm going to the pawn shop early tomorrow," Aaliyah said, "before I go to work. With what they give us for the rings, we can buy nutritious food for her. She looks very thin." They were still talking about the rings. They were really going to do it. They were going to sell the only objects of value they had. "There's something I don't understand," Malik said after a silence. "How could my mom, with all her business knowledge, lose everything so fast? She was brilliant, careful. It doesn't make sense." Aaliyah took a moment to respond. "Brilliant people also make mistakes," she said finally. "Or maybe she trusted the wrong people. I don't know. What matters is that she's here and we're going to help her." "I'm scared," Malik admitted. "Scared of not being able to take care of her as she took care of me. She gave me everything, education, opportunities, and I can only offer her an old sofa and simple food." "Malik," Aaliyah said firmly, "you are giving her the only thing that really matters. You are giving her love. That is more valuable than any mansion or bank account." "Not for her," Malik replied sadly. "Her whole life has been about material success, about building empires. What will she think of me now, seeing me in this small house without being able to give her anything she deserves?" "Maybe," Aaliyah said thoughtfully, "maybe this is exactly what she needed to see. That success isn't measured in square footage or bank accounts. It's measured in who is there when everything else collapses." Her words floated in the air. She was right, completely right. This test I had designed to evaluate my children was evaluating me too. It was showing me all the ways I had failed, all the wrong lessons I had taught, all the distorted values I had transmitted without realizing it. Brianna and Terrence were my creation. I had turned them into what they were. I had taught them that money solves everything, that appearances matter more than substance, that success is measured in material possessions, and they had learned the lesson perfectly. Only Malik had resisted. He had chosen a different path despite my subtle disapprovals. He had found in Aaliyah someone who shared values I had forgotten existed, and together they had built something Brianna and Terrence would never have, a life with real purpose and meaning. I went back to bed with a heavy heart. Tomorrow, everything would change. Moses would arrive with the documents, with the truth, with the proof that I was never bankrupt, that this was all a theater to reveal the true character of my children. And it had revealed much more than I expected, not only about them, but about me as well. I finally fell asleep, emotionally exhausted, knowing that when the sun rose, the last act of this painful and necessary drama would begin. The act where the truth would come to light, where justice would be served, where accounts would be settled. But I also knew that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. The broken relationships with Brianna and Terrence would probably never be repaired, and the relationship with Malik and Aaliyah would be transformed in ways I couldn't yet fully predict. The only thing I knew for certain was that these two human beings asleep on an uncomfortable sofa, willing to sell their wedding rings for a woman who had looked down on them, deserved everything I could give them, and tomorrow I would give it to them. I woke up before dawn. The burner phone Moses had given me was hidden in the inner pocket of my dirty coat. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It was 5:30 in the morning. I dialed the number I had memorized. Moses answered on the second ring. "Evelyn," he said, sounding sleepy but alert. "Are you okay? Did something happen?" "I'm okay," I whispered, so as not to wake Malik and Aaliyah. "It's time. Come at 9 in the morning. Bring the documents. Bring the security team. Everything as we planned." There was a pause. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." "I'm sure. I replied, more sure than I've been of anything in my life. I'll see you at 9. I hung up and put the phone away. I sat on the bed watching the first lights of dawn filter through the cheap brown curtains. In a few hours, everything would change. The mask would fall, and I would have to face the consequences of what I had discovered. I got up and left the bedroom. Malik and Aaliyah were still asleep on the sofa. They looked so uncomfortable it hurt to watch. Malik's arm hung down to the floor. Aaliyah's head was at a strange angle against the backrest, but their hands were intertwined even in sleep. I prepared coffee in silence. I found bread and toasted it. I set the table as best I could, small acts of service that were all I could offer them in this last moment before the truth exploded. Aaliyah woke up first. She saw me in the kitchen and smiled with that tired but genuine smile. "You got up early," she said, stretching carefully so as not to wake Malik. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "I was thinking." She approached and accepted the cup of coffee I offered. "Thinking about what?" she asked with curiosity but no pressure. "About you," I replied honestly. "About what you have done for me. About what you're willing to do." Aaliyah took a sip of coffee. Her eyes studied me over the cup. There was something in her look, a quiet intelligence that suggested maybe there was more than she let on. "Mildred," she said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, although my heart started beating faster. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to," she continued, "but something doesn't add up. A woman like you, with your experience, with your intelligence, how did you lose everything so fast? And why did you come walking to our houses instead of asking for help some other way?" I froze. Aaliyah was looking at me with an expression that wasn't accusatory, but definitely curious. She was waiting for me to say something that would explain the inconsistencies her sharp mind had detected. Before I could respond, Malik woke up with a groan, his back clearly hurt from the night on the sofa. "Good morning," he said, rubbing his neck. "What time is it?" "Almost 7, Aaliyah replied, but her eyes didn't leave mine. "We were talking." Malik got up and approached us. He noticed the tension in the air. "Is something wrong?" he asked, looking between the two of us. Aaliyah softened her expression. "No, nothing. We were just talking." But I knew that she knew, or at least suspected. This woman everyone underestimated, who cleaned offices and cared for flowers, had a perception my children educated in expensive universities never developed. "I need to tell you something," I started, but the words got stuck in my throat. Malik put a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, Mom, we're here." Aaliyah spoke again. "Before you say anything, I want you to know that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what secret you're keeping. It doesn't matter what test you put us through. We still opened the door for you. We still offered you our bed, and we would do it again." I stood there looking at her with my mouth open. "You knew?" I managed to say finally. "I suspected," she corrected. "Since you arrived, your way of speaking, your posture, the small details that didn't fit. But I decided it didn't matter, because even if this was a test, the right answer was still the same. Receive you, care for you, love you." Malik looked between us, confused. "What are you talking about?" Aaliyah looked at him with tenderness. "Your mother isn't bankrupt, honey, or at least I don't think she is. I think this was a test to see how we would react." Malik turned to me with wide eyes. "Is it true?" he asked. Tears ran down my face. "Yes," I whispered. "It's true. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I expected to see anger. I expected shouting. I expected them to kick me out of the house with justified indignation. But Malik simply hugged me. He hugged me tight while I cried against his chest. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why did you do this?" "Because I needed to know," I replied between sobs. "I needed to know who loved me for being their mother and who only saw me as a source of money, and I discovered things that broke my heart." I told them everything. About Brianna closing the door for fear of what the neighbors would say, about Terrence giving me $50 and pushing me out, about how only the two of them had received me without conditions. When I finished, Aaliyah said something I will never forget. "Then the test worked. You discovered the truth, and we also discovered something." "What did you discover?" I asked. "That we would do the right thing even when no one was watching," she responded. "That our values are real, not an act. That we are exactly who we thought we were." Malik added, "And we also discovered that you need to heal, Mom, because a mother who has to test the love of her children like this is very hurt." He was right, completely right. I looked at the clock. It was 8:15. In 45 minutes, Moses would arrive with everything, with the documents that would prove my wealth, with the security team, with the evidence that would change everything. "There's something else," I told them. "At 9, my lawyer is coming with documents. He's going to reveal who I really am, and there are going to be consequences for Brianna and Terrence." "What kind of consequences?" Malik asked. "I'm going to rewrite my will," I replied with a firm voice. "They closed their doors to me. I'm going to close mine. You two will inherit everything." Malik stepped back as if my words had hit him physically. "No," he said immediately. "You can't do that, Mom. They are your children, too." "Children who rejected me when I needed them most," I responded. "Children who valued their reputation and comfort more than my well-being. While you and Aaliyah were willing to sell your wedding bands for me." Aaliyah intervened. "Mildred, I understand your pain. I understand your anger. But disinheriting your children won't heal what is broken. It will only create more resentment, more division. It's not about revenge," I argued, although deep down I knew there was some revenge in my decision. "It's about consequences. It's about teaching them that actions have results, that you can't treat people like trash and expect to keep receiving rewards." Malik sat on the sofa with his head in his hands. "This is too much," he murmured. "I don't want your money, Mom. I never wanted it. I chose to be a teacher precisely because I wanted something more meaningful than accumulating wealth." "I know," I said, sitting beside him. "And that's why you deserve to have it. Because you don't seek it. Because you understand that money is a tool, not a goal." Aaliyah knelt in front of us. Her eyes went from Malik to me. "Can I suggest something?" she asked carefully. "Please," I replied. "I need to hear a sane voice in the middle of all this." "Don't do anything permanent today," she said. "Let Moses come. Let the truth be revealed. But don't rewrite the will immediately. Give yourself time. Give Brianna and Terrence time, too. Maybe when they face what they did, when they see the real consequences of their actions, something will change in them." "They aren't going to change," I said bitterly. "I know them." "You knew them," Aaliyah corrected. "But people can surprise us, for better or for worse. Give me a chance to be wrong about them." Malik raised his head. "Mom, if you really want to teach them something, teach them with your life, not with your death. Show them what true love looks like, what forgiveness looks like. Don't give them more money if you don't want to. That's fine. But don't cut them out of your life completely. That will hurt you more than it hurts them." Their words went deep. This son of mine, this good man who earned less in a year than his siblings spent on vacations, was giving me lessons in humanity that I desperately needed. "What do you propose then?" I asked. "Let the lawyer come," Malik responded. "Let Brianna and Terrence know that this was a test. Let them feel the weight of what they did. But after that, offer them an opportunity for restoration. Not money, but a relationship. If they want it, they'll have to earn it. If not, at least you'll know you tried." I looked at the clock. 8:30. Half an hour to decide how I would handle the most important moment of this test. Half an hour to decide if I wanted justice or reconciliation, revenge or healing. "I'll call Moses," I finally said. "I'll tell him to come, but not to bring the will documents, only the ones that prove my real identity." Aaliyah smiled. "It's a good start." I dialed Moses' number. "Change of plans," I told him when he answered. "Bring everything except the will papers. This is going to be a confrontation, not an execution." "Understood," he replied. "We'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and looked at Malik and Aaliyah. "I don't know if I can forgive them," I admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at Brianna and Terrence the same way." "You don't have to know today," Aaliyah said. "Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a path, sometimes long and painful, but it's worth walking." The next 20 minutes passed in a tense silence. We sat together in the small living room. Aaliyah prepared more coffee. Malik changed his clothes. I stayed in the borrowed hoodie and sweatpants. I wanted Moses to see me like this. I wanted to remember how it felt to be on the other side. At 9 o'clock exactly, we heard the vehicles pull up outside. I looked out the window and saw 2 black SUVs. Moses stepped out of the first one along with his assistant. From the second vehicle, 4 men from the security team got out, dressed in formal suits. The contrast was absurd. This humble house in this working-class neighborhood suddenly invaded by this display of power and money. Neighbors began peering through their windows. Some stepped out into their front yards to see what was happening. I opened the door before they could even knock. Moses looked at me, and for a moment he didn't recognize me. Then his eyes widened. "My God, Evelyn," he whispered. "You look terrible." "Thanks," I replied with dry irony. "Let me introduce you to the only 2 people who cared about how I looked when I arrived at their door." Malik and Aaliyah approached timidly. They were clearly intimidated by this demonstration of resources. Moses greeted them with genuine respect. "It's an honor to meet you," he said. "Evelyn has told me a lot about you these last few days." "Nothing good, I assume," Aaliyah said with a sad smile. "All good," Moses corrected. "All very good." They all came in. The small living room was filled with people. The security men stood awkwardly, clearly out of place in this modest space. Moses opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. "These are the bank statements for your companies," he said, showing me the papers. "Everything is running perfectly. The board of directors has handled daily operations in your absence. As we agreed, there was no bankruptcy, no loss. Everything was fabricated." Malik looked at the numbers on the documents. His eyes grew wider and wider. "Mom," he whispered, "these numbers are real." "Completely real," Moses confirmed. "Your mother is one of the wealthiest women in the country, and she pretended to lose everything to test her children." Aaliyah put her hand to her mouth. "We were willing to sell our rings," she said almost inaudibly, "and you could have bought 1,000 rings without even noticing." "That's exactly why," I responded. "Because you would have sold your rings, while my other children wouldn't even open their doors." Moses pulled out more documents. "These are the records of the calls I made to Brianna and Terrence early this morning," he said. "I informed them there was new information about your situation and to be here at 10 o'clock. Both confirmed they would come." I looked at the clock. 9:40. In 20 minutes, my other 2 children would arrive and find something they never expected. They would find the truth, and they would find the consequences of their choices. Malik looked sick. "I don't know if I can be here when they arrive," he said. "I don't know if I can see their faces when they realize." "You need to be here," I said firmly. "You need to be a witness to this because this isn't just about them. It's about you too. It's about validating that your way of living, your way of loving, is the right one. It's about demonstrating that you're not the failure they always implied you were." Aaliyah took his hand. "I'll be here with you," she told him, "whatever happens." The minutes dragged on. Moses went over documents. The security men waited in silence. Malik and Aaliyah sat together on the sofa, their hands intertwined. And I stood by the window, watching the street, waiting to see the expensive cars of my other children appear. At 5 minutes to 10, Brianna arrived. Her white Mercedes shone obscenely on this street of modest cars. She parked and got out wearing oversized sunglasses and a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Malik's monthly rent. 2 minutes later, Terrence arrived. His gray BMW stopped behind Brianna's Mercedes. He got out checking his expensive watch, clearly annoyed at having to be here. They met on the sidewalk in front of Malik's house. I saw them talking. Brianna gestured toward the house with evident contempt. Terrence shrugged. Neither of them seemed happy to be here. They walked together toward the door. I could hear their voices before they knocked. "Why would Mom's lawyer summon us here?" Brianna asked with clear disgust. "At Malik's house? This is ridiculous." "No idea," Terrence replied. "But let's do this fast. I have surgery at 1. They knocked on the door. Malik looked at me with panic in his eyes. I nodded. He breathed deep and opened it. The expression on the faces of Brianna and Terrence when they saw Malik was one of barely disguised annoyance. "What are you doing here?" Brianna asked, as if Malik were an intruder in his own home. "I live here," Malik responded with a trembling voice. "It's my house." Brianna walked in without waiting for an invitation. Terrence followed behind her. Their eyes scanned the small living room with poorly hidden disdain. They saw Moses in his expensive suit. They saw the security men. They saw the documents scattered on the table. And then they saw me. Brianna froze. "Mom?" she exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" She turned to Moses. "You told us you had information about our mother's situation, not that she would be here." "Oh, she is definitely here," Moses said in a tone I had never heard from him. Cold, professional, devastating. Terrence looked me up and down. I was still wearing Aaliyah's borrowed clothes. My hair was still not professionally styled. I still looked poor. "Did you get the money to come all the way here?" he asked in that condescending tone he probably used with indigent patience. "I didn't need money," I responded. "I was already here. I've been here for 3 days since I knocked on your doors asking for shelter." The silence that followed was absolute. I saw their brains processing the information, how the pieces began to fit. "I knocked on your door first, Brianna," I continued. "I told you I had lost everything, that I needed a place to sleep, and you closed the door in my face because you were afraid of what the neighbors at the club would say." Brianna turned pale. "I didn't know it was really you," she started to say. "You looked like a homeless person. I thought it was some kind of scam." "It was me," I said firmly. "Your mother, dirty and desperate, and you didn't care." I turned toward Terrence. "And you gave me $50 as if I were a bothersome beggar. You told me it affected your reputation, that I was a distraction." Terrence opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face had gone from arrogant to horrified. But Malik and Aaliyah, I pointed to the couple sitting on the sofa, opened their door to me immediately. They gave me their bed, their food, their warmth, without asking questions, without worrying about appearances. They were willing to sell their wedding bands to help me. Brianna finally found her voice. "This was a trap," she accused. "You set a trap for us." "I gave you a test," I corrected. "A test that you failed spectacularly." Moses intervened. "Allow me to clarify your mother's financial situation." He pulled the documents and put them on the table. "Evelyn Kincaid is not bankrupt. She lost nothing. Her companies are operating with record profits. Her accounts are intact. Her net worth is currently approximately $58 million. The number floated in the air like a bomb. Brianna and Terrence looked at the documents without being able to fully process what they were seeing. "This was all an act," Moses continued. "Your mother pretended to lose everything to see how you would react, to see who would love her without money, who would worry about her well-being above their personal image." Brianna collapsed into a chair. Her face was as white as paper. Terrence stood rigid, as if in shock. Malik got up from the sofa. His voice trembled when he spoke. "You two have treated me like a failure for years, as if choosing to be a teacher was a shame for the family, as if Aaliyah wasn't enough because she didn't have money or a prominent name. You looked at me with pity, with contempt." Brianna tried to interrupt, but Malik raised his hand. "It's my turn to talk. For years, I heard you make hurtful comments. I heard you laugh at my salary. I heard you compare your houses, your cars, your lives with mine, as if I had failed at something fundamental." Tears ran down Malik's face, but his voice grew stronger. And when Mom appeared at my door, dirty and scared, I didn't even hesitate. because that's how I was raised, to love without conditions, to help without asking. And you two had the same upbringing, the same parents, the same lessons, but you chose something different. Aaliyah stood up beside him. Her voice was calm but firm. You hated me. I know you did, because I wasn't good enough for your brother, because I cleaned offices and didn't have a university education. But when your mother needed help, when you rejected her, we received her, and we would do it again. Brianna finally reacted. She began to cry, not silent tears, but loud and dramatic sobs. "I'm sorry," she screamed. "I didn't know. I thought you were a stranger." "That is precisely the point," I said with a hard voice. "I had to be a stranger for you to treat me like that, but I was still your mother, and if I had really been a homeless woman, I still deserved more compassion than you showed me." Terrence found his voice. "This isn't fair. You put us in an impossible position. You deceived us." "I put you in a position of choice," I corrected. "A choice that Malik passed without even thinking about it. You failed. Not because you didn't know it was me. You failed because your values are rotten to the core." Moses cleared his throat. "Mildred had asked me to bring documents to modify her will, to completely disinherit Brianna and Terrence, and leave everything to Malik and Aaliyah." Brianna stopped crying instantaneously. Her eyes widened with horror. "You can't do that," she said. "Can't I?" I responded. "And I had every intention of doing it." "Had?" Terrence asked, catching the past tense. "Malik and Aaliyah convinced me not to make that decision today," I explained. "They told me to give you a chance, that forgiveness is a path, not an event." "Thank you," Brianna whispered, looking at Malik. "Don't thank me," Malik said coldly. "I would have let Mom disinherit you. It was Aaliyah who argued for mercy, the woman you despised." Brianna turned toward Aaliyah. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry for treating you badly. I'm sorry for everything." Aaliyah looked at her for a long moment. "You don't believe me yet," she finally said. "You're just scared of losing your inheritance. But when that fear passes, when you're back in your mansion and your comfortable life, you'll go back to despising me because you haven't changed. You're just scared." Aaliyah's words were like precision knives. Brianna opened her mouth to protest but stopped because she knew it was true. I turned toward my 3 children. "This is what's going to happen. I am not going to change my will today, but I am also not going to continue being your personal bank. The allowances are over. The financial bailouts are over. If you want my money when I die, you'll have to earn a real relationship with me first." "What does that mean?" Terrence asked. "It means family therapy," Moses responded. "It means real work on your relationships. It means demonstrating over years, not days or weeks, that you have genuinely changed. And if you don't, the will be rewritten, and everything will go to Malik and Aaliyah." Brianna and Terrence looked at each other. I could see the calculations forming in their minds. They were evaluating if the effort was worth it, if faking a change for years was an investment that yielded enough return. And that broke my heart again, because even now, even after everything, they were still thinking in transactional terms. "Is there anything else I need to say?" I continued. "And this is the most important part. Malik, Aaliyah, please step forward." They stood up and walked toward me. I took their hands in mine. "You two showed me something I had forgotten existed. You showed me genuine love, real sacrifice, values that aren't bought or sold. And although I'm not going to rewrite my will today, I am going to do something right now." I looked at Moses. "The package we prepared," I said. "Bring it." Moses smiled and pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. He handed it to Malik. "Open it," I told him. With trembling hands, Malik opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents and a checkbook. He read aloud, "Property deed." His eyes widened. "Mom, what is this?" "It's the deed to a house," I explained. "A real house with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a large garden for Aaliyah to plant all the flowers she wants, in a safe neighborhood near the school where you work. I bought it 2 days ago when I knew what you were going to do for me." Malik looked at the document, unable to believe what he was seeing. "We can't accept this," he said. "It's too much." "It's not a gift," I clarified. "It's recognition. It's my way of saying I saw what you did, that I value your character more than I ever valued your siblings' university degrees." Aaliyah was crying silently. "Mildred," she whispered, "we didn't have to pass any test. We didn't expect anything in return." "I know," I said, hugging her. "That's why you deserve it. Because you didn't expect it. Because you would have done it anyway." Brianna stood up abruptly. "This is unfair," she shouted. "We are also your children. Why do they get a house now and we get nothing?" I turned toward her with a frozen calm. "Because you already have houses I helped pay for. You have received from me for decades. Money, opportunities, connections, everything you asked for. Malik never asked for anything. He worked, he struggled, he built a dignified life with his own hands. And when I needed him, he was there." Terrence intervened. "So this is a punishment. You're punishing us for a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said with a hard voice. "It was a revelation. A mistake is something you do unintentionally. You consciously chose to close your doors to me. You chose your comfort over my well-being. Those were decisions, not mistakes." "But we regret it," Brianna insisted. "We are sorry." "Today you are sorry," I responded, "because you discovered I still have money, because you're afraid of losing your inheritance. But what about the regret when I was just a dirty woman at your door? Where was your compassion then?" The silence that followed was so thick it hurt to breathe. Brianna was crying again. Terrence looked at the floor. Malik and Aaliyah clung to each other, overwhelmed by everything. "Listen to me well, all three of you," I said, looking at all of them. "This family is broken. I contributed to breaking it. I taught you that money solves everything, that success is measured in possessions. Brianna, Terrence, you learned that lesson all too well. Malik, you rejected it. And now we all have to live with the consequences." I turned specifically toward Brianna and Terrence. "If you want a relationship with me, if you want me to consider keeping you in my will, here are the conditions. First, family therapy. All of us, every week, no exceptions. Second, I want to see you do community service. I want you to work with homeless people, to see the faces of people like the one you thought I was. Third, I want real apologies, not to me, to Malik and Aaliyah for years of contempt and condescension. And fourth, I want time, real time. Not calls when you need something, but family dinners, genuine conversations, true interest in each other's lives. I want a real family, not a business transaction disguised as a relationship." "That's a lot to ask," Terrence said weakly. "It's the minimum," I corrected. "It is literally the minimum you should want to do if you really care about me as a person and not as a walking inheritance." Brianna approached. "Mom," she said with a breaking voice, "you're right. Above all, I have become someone horrible, someone you never wanted me to be. And I don't know if I can change, but I want to try. Not for the money, but because I saw my future when I closed that door. I saw myself becoming an old, lonely woman in an empty mansion, and it terrified me." It was the first genuine thing I had heard her say in years. Maybe there was hope, maybe not. Time would tell. Terrence also approached. "I want to try too," he said. "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to learn." I looked at them both. The skepticism must have been evident on my face because Brianna added, "I know you don't believe us, and that's fine. We haven't earned your trust, but give us the opportunity to rebuild it, please." I looked at Malik. He was the one who had suffered their disdain the most. "What do you think?" I asked him. Malik took a deep breath. "If they really try, if they really change, then yes, give them the chance. But if this is just an act, if they go back to their old patterns once the shock passes, then Mom must carry out her threat." Aaliyah nodded in agreement. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said, "but third chances have to be earned." It was settled. Moses noted everything down. He would draw up a formal document establishing the conditions for Brianna and Terrence to remain in my will. If they failed any of the requirements during the next 3 years, they would be automatically removed. "There is one more thing," I said, looking at Malik and Aaliyah. "I want you to know that whatever happens with your siblings, you will always have a place in my life. You saved me, not from the street, because I was never really there, but from becoming someone so bitter and cynical that I would have lost faith in humanity." Aaliyah hugged me. "You saved us too," she whispered. "You showed us that doing the right thing matters, that our values have meaning." We spent the next hour arranging details. Moses scheduled the first family therapy session. Brianna and Terrence committed to the conditions, signed documents, and made promises. I didn't know if they would fulfill them, but at least now there was a path, a possibility. And that was more than I had 3 days ago when I started this test. When everyone finally left, when the house returned to silence, I sat on the old sofa with Malik and Aaliyah beside me. "I'm sorry for judging you," I told Aaliyah, taking her hand. "I'm sorry for all the years I made you feel less. I'm sorry for every look of disappointment, every hurtful comment I didn't stop. You were exactly what Malik needed. You were exactly what this family needed, and I was too blind to see it." Aaliyah squeezed my hand. "Forgiveness isn't begged for, Mildred. It's offered. And I forgive you because I understand. You were afraid for your son. You wanted the best for him. It's just that your definition of best was wrong." "My definition of everything was wrong," I admitted. "I built an empire, but almost lost the only thing that really matters. Family. Genuine connection. Unconditional love." Malik put his arm around my shoulders. "You didn't lose it, Mom. We're still here, and now you know who we really are. That's a gift." He was right. This horrible and necessary test had given me clarity. Pain, yes, but also clarity. I knew exactly where I stood with each of my children. I knew who loved me with or without money. I knew who would sacrifice something real for me. And I also knew something else. I knew the money I had spent my life accumulating was just a tool, nothing more. It didn't buy love, it didn't buy loyalty, it didn't buy the things that really mattered. What mattered was sitting beside me on an old sofa in a small house. It was a teacher with a modest salary and his hard-working wife. It was people who valued the flowers in the garden more than the diamonds in their ears. It was a real family. Standing at the door of that modest house 3 days ago, dirty and rejected by 2 of my children, I thought I had hit rock bottom. But I was wrong. I had found something more valuable than all the money in my bank accounts. I had found the path back to what really matters. And although the path forward with Brianna and Terrence was uncertain, at least now I knew the truth. And the truth, however painful, was better than the comfortable illusion I had been living in. Money buys many things, I thought, as I looked around that small and humble room. But it doesn't buy the doors that open when you need them most. It doesn't buy the hands that hold you when you fall. It doesn't buy the love that receives you without questions. Those things only come from the heart, and the only hearts large enough to give me that were here in this house, in this moment, and that was worth more than $58 million.